Okay, everyone, it's about time, so let's start. And today we are very happy to have a team from GSK to introduce developing and managing resilient supply chains. And we have Ashish Gupta. He is the Vice President for Supply Chain Planning and Strategy with GSK. And we also have Rachel Rawlings, and she is online, and she is supply chain planning manager. And we also have Lydia Lee, and she is an HR talent lead. So we really appreciate their time here and introduce the experience and also introduce their talent programs and also internship programs. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Leanne. Appreciate it. Just a kind of sound check. Everyone can hear us okay? Rachel, can you hear us okay online?
Yeah, I can hear you well, Ashish.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Leanne, for having us as you did in introduction. So I have the supply chain strategy group. So now I was doing a quick intro. You're saying GlaxoSmithKline.
So I was assuming like if it's like a glass company, or I'm not too.
Yeah, it's a pharma company. So Glaxo and SmithKline Beecham came in around 2000, and it's one of the bigger, big pharma companies. Like it's a British company like AstraZeneca, and American companies you would know a bit more: Johnson & Johnson, Merck. They're closer here in New Jersey. So in US we are based out of Philadelphia, not too far. Lydia and I are there. Rachel is also based there, but Rachel is right now in Panama. She's on an adventure. So I brought Rachel in because Rachel is a graduate. Rachel is at this building of the school. So Rachel is a Rutgers, graduate, and she joined a few years ago as a part of our Future Leaders program, and is doing really well. So the way we have designed the program today is I'll talk a bit about supply chain resilience and what's going on in the global world. A lot of general topics we should talk through, what ideas you have, and the few things we are doing in GSK, and we can share with you how it's kind of helping us do the work a bit differently, with pandemic, etc. Then Rachel will actually talk a bit about what is GSK's supply chain, what does it look like, and a bit of her journey coming out of Rutgers into GSK. What does it feel like, so that you can relate to it? And Lydia is from our HR department. We'll talk a bit about where are some openings in supply chain department, how to get in. We have a Future Leaders program that's open for enrollment right now. So this is a good time if you guys are interested. So let's do this. It will be, and I was telling Rachel, it's a funny one. She's in Panama. She doesn't get to wear the mask. We are all here in the room. So it's a bit of a guessing game, but hey, this is how we look like, okay? Just just to make sure the flow goes okay. Are you okay noting down the questions? What we'll do is we'll breeze through the slides, etc. If you can note down the questions, we can do a bit of a Q&A at the end. Does that work okay? Perfect. Let's dive in. We have some fancy slides, so it should be fun. Okay, so supply chains, I think as much as what's going on in the world with pandemic, it has totally changed the rules of the game. Supply chain experts are having a time of their life. This is when we thrive, when adversity is. Otherwise, it's all driven by marketing and finance. People are happy counting money or selling, whether it's medicines or microchips or whatever. But when you cannot get the product from A to B to the customer, that's when everyone's looking at supply chain people. So this has been a very interesting phase with pandemic actually exposing some systemic issues across businesses. So I'll talk a bit about, although we are a pharma company, you will see, I don't know if you guys are hearing, if you're trying to buy a car now, it's very difficult. There are not enough cars on the road because you don't have microchips. There's a whole thing going on with microchip shortage, but it's the same for pharma companies. We have issues with ingredients and what vaccines production has done. It has taken so much material out of the market vaccine companies are hoarding and piling on to some of these raw materials, and everyone's kind of running around trying to figure out what's happening. But pandemic is not the only thing that has moved. This is kind of a visual that illustrates. This is like last 12 months or 18 months. You have had a massive hurricane in US South. You have global chip shortage, which is pandemic, but it has been coming, for years. Anyone remember this ship that got stuck in Suez Canal? It blocked the traffic. The oil prices went up almost 30% within 1 week because anything happens, oil prices go up, right? So with Panama Canal and Suez Canal, anything that interrupts traffic, the global trade pretty much stops. So this is, a once in a lifetime thing, but it happened in last 12 months. And if you guys remember the Colonial Pipeline hack recently, it kind of, again, there's a theme here. Anything happens, gas prices go up. So there's a lot going on, and with pandemic in the background, it has created a lot of discussion within supply chain community, how to plan for this. Because at school, you learn a lot of, and everything is okay, how to create your inventory buffers, how to run your factories, how to plan and do calculations. But when you get pandemic, a lot of that goes out the window quickly. Your buffers are, you don't know whether you're calculating for 6 months or 12 months or 1 year. So you don't know. So Leah, let's go to the next one. I've pulled out a slide. Is there a way for us to go full screen? Click on the view. Here. Full screen. Perfect. Yeah, it's still small, but we can look at this. I pulled this out of a McKinsey report on resilience. It's a very interesting one, and I'll kind of leave you with a link. McKinsey did an analysis of what are they dropped the massive interruptions on a 2x2 and created a quadrant. And their analysis says that industry has a bias looking at things that happen frequently. What's available in front of your eyes, it happens. That's where most of us actually think and plan for the stuff. But not many times we are either taught at schools or when you come in as a young intern into GSK, we talk about how should supply chain be ready for a pandemic or a massive earthquake. So it's not that these things are not anticipated. If they have not been frequent, and typically the way psychology works, we actually try and anticipate stuff and think what can happen in short term and just be prepared for it. So I've just called out, these are a few things that have actually happened in recent past, and I'll just put a question mark. I don't know how you classify this pandemic. Is this extreme pandemic or is this a pandemic that is solved now? You don't know, right? When we were in early 2020, we were thinking probably 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Now we have vaccines, we still have surges going on. So it is still, a question mark what's going on in the world. But this is not an isolated event, right? If you go to the next one, right? Maybe let's go back. I'll just call out another one. Thanks. The biggest event in supply chain that changed, caused disruption in last 10 years was the Fukushima earthquake in Japan. Pandemics like much better, but between now and then, there were other things. We had some massive hurricanes, we had trade wars going on with China, but we were not mentally prepared. But this is a good time, everyone's kind of standing back and looking at what to do. So question is going to be how companies are going to be prepared. Lydia, let's go to the next one. So I've pulled this out of a BCG analysis where they have actually done the financial recovery of various firms and seen how good companies perform versus companies that are not prepared, companies that are prepared, how they work with, their defense mechanisms versus companies that are not prepared. And they've kind of classified this into 3 buckets. First is thinking through, right? Like anticipating. And I'll talk through what does anticipation mean. With the advent of AI, predictability has become a bit handy. So what, as a company, as a supply chain, or as a business expert, if you are CEO of a company or chief supply chain or procurement officer, what are you thinking when you're saying, okay, what can happen? So how to look at that and be prepared and take data-driven decisions. Good companies are working on it, and we'll show you an example. I have a decent one. We have something that we are using in GSK, and I'll talk through. And I think Rachel is going to talk a bit about her scenario planning experience. She's using a software called LlamaSoft. And the second one is cushioning. So this is how you have prepared driving redundancy and actually managing this impact on an ongoing basis. So companies that do that well, they don't see that dip, but companies that are waiting, they see a dip and you have to recover from the dip. And recovering from the dip is another ball game in itself. Companies that are better prepared, that have better inventory strategy, that have better supplier strategy, they bounce back faster, right? So in a way, if we say that this is how the world's going to be, we are going to see these events unfold in front of us. How are companies bouncing back, right? How does a company that's better prepared do versus a company that's not prepared as well? Let's go to the next one. What I've done is I've taken the three aspects of being prepared, cushioning, and recovery, and I've tried to put some flavor to it. What does it mean? And I'll try and do some examples and note your questions. We should talk through what you feel, what other ideas you have. I'll talk with a few that we are doing in GSK or something I've seen. So the first one is increasing the ability to absorb shocks, right? So I've appended the order a bit. I'm taking anticipations last. That's how I'm going to flow. So once you get into a shock, whether it's induced by a pandemic or a trade war, there's another interesting one right now that's outlined, although we are talking about pandemic a lot. There's a lot of tension going on between China and Taiwan. Not many people are anticipating how that will go. If it escalates quickly, it can escalate to a lot of things. What we are seeing in GSK is that there is a constant congestion on ports of Shanghai, which is one of the biggest port hubs globally, and we are typically seeing about 2 weeks of delays on anything coming out of Shanghai. But how, I just gave you one example. What are these 5 or 10 things out there that can totally, change the game? And even if we are able to predict one of them a little better than others, how we can actually use that as a leverage. So I'll talk a bit about that. Second one is reactive. Once you have the shock, how are you bouncing back? How to be prepared to do that? I think avoiding a situation is, yeah, you can do it like, 5 out of 10 times, but you need to know how to manage it. So I'll talk a bit about inventory strategies. I'll talk a bit about a risk mapping approach with suppliers that we are doing. And, we can show a bit detail. I have some screenshots, we can talk about that. And although I say this last, proactive is the one that we are actually scanning in the market right now, and I have some good examples there. So let's go to the first one, and I'll kind of talk through increasing the ability to absorb shocks, okay? The most important thing here is, right, it's never written in a playbook what we do as a company. In January, 3rd week of January last year, Wuhan was seeing the outbreak, and we were sitting here in America and guessing how it's going to happen. I still remember we had a few infections in Washington, then a ship showed up in California. Things were kind of, trying to come, but we were not sure what impact it's going to have in the world. At that point of time, a lot of smart companies started doing crisis management and business continuity, right? It doesn't take a lot, but you've got to have a playbook, right? How will all the key functions coming together? What are the suppliers in China? Who are your suppliers in Wuhan? Contacting them, understanding, what's the situation on the ground. Then managers sitting here in the US or in London or in Tokyo, actually doing head count of all the factories. Is everyone okay as pandemic is spreading? Then the second one I remember in late February and then mid-March, as US was getting into a lockdown, Italy was 2 weeks ahead of us. The biggest outbreak was happening in Europe and Italy. We have 2 factories in Italy. Those were like closed. People could not get, they had a massive lockdown. We had, now it's very easy. Everyone thinks, oh, this thing's locked down. Now we can do, we have masks. I still remember myself trying to go to every shop in South Jersey where I live, couldn't find a mask, couldn't find sanitizer, couldn't find alcohol, aloe vera gel. If you mix them, you make a scent. Everything, people started hoarding stuff. Just imagine the domino, that was happening globally on. So these are still discretionary items on important things like medicines, right? If you're a cancer patient, how will you move this medicine from A to B? Because if patient doesn't get a cancer medicine, it can be end of life. So business continuity planning, and I think Lydia, that's the one on the next slide, is the key. So I've not called out how to do business continuity planning, but senior leadership in supply chain functions, in management functions, in global companies need to sit down and write a playbook that says, if a catastrophic scenario happens, how we will organize, who will go out and check well-being of employees, who will go out and check what's going on with the suppliers, who's going to go on and check what's happening with our customers and reassure them that, hey, we have a plan and we'll make sure you're supplied, okay? And the second part of that is actually running this like a clockwork. There are various words you use. You probably, Leanne, you teach that at Rutgers. We call that as like issue management team. So we form a team of senior stakeholders, your chief procurement officer, your head of supply chain, your head of human resources. They come together and twice a week running like an issue management team and saying, that can be as simple as taking head count of employees, finding out who are the sick employees, if the cargo is moving across various hubs, if patients are being supplied and all that. But like start running it like, a team with a focus that's, with a heartbeat of like, it can go to a daily meeting, right? If it's in a crisis mode. So a simple, but a very, very effective way. It's been 18 months now, maybe we still have issue management teams running because we are lucky we are in US, we have vaccines. There are a lot of places in Asia that still don't have vaccines. There are surges happening like Singapore, which is one of the most advanced countries in the world, is undergoing through a surge right now. Like it's kind of, slowing down. So we have factories there that need to be monitored on a regular basis. So very crude kind of, tool, but being prepared with a business continuity plan and executing an issue management team is perhaps one of the most important things. So this is something that actually helps you absorb all the shocks. If you don't have a score of what's going on in the company around the world, you'll start losing control of it. Okay, let's go to the next one. Yeah, let's jump to the next slide. I pulled out a data from one of the Gartner papers, and it says 58% of the respondents say that saying that all is easy, but being prepared for these things is adding cost. This is totally counterintuitive to a lot of things we learn in lean manufacturing. Like I'm a Lean Sigma Master Black Belt, and all I used to tell people is do the right thing right first time and reduce inventory just in time, right? If you talk about auto industry, I don't know if anyone has studied how Toyota does it. Like I've been to Japan, visited Nagoya, Toyota factories. It's like clockwork. But when stuff happens, a lot of lean manufacturing totally goes out of window because it's all actually based on ability to turn around supplies on an ongoing basis. So it's like perfect clockwork precision. So I remember walking into a Toyota factory in Nagoya. They don't have any inventory in their warehouses. Every 3 hours, suppliers come from various other sources in Japan and they drop product on the line. It's such an efficient way of doing it, but imagine with pandemic, that's not going to work. So one thing we are doing, and I think Rachel, you're going to talk through a bit of that, is scenario planning. And what it said is it's a case of just in time versus just in case. What should be your just in case buffer? But this is expensive business, right? Inventory is money sitting in your warehouse doing nothing. It could have been in the bank earning interest or in the stock market invested, right? We'll talk a bit about what are the trade-offs, and I have a slide later where actually I talk a bit about what is, you guys do safety stock calculations and stuff like that here, inventory projection. So I'll talk a bit about strategic stock, what we do over and above, calculating inventory in the pipeline. Let's go to the next one. Okay, I don't know. This was a big deal for everyone in supply chain. Biden standing up and saying there's an executive order. There's hardly ever an executive order on supply chain. It's all on all fancy things. Politicians normally don't stay close to supply chain. So this was a big thing, and this is drawing a massive reaction. I don't know if you guys have studied it. I copied this from the White House website. If not, you should go and read the executive order, and then they have a 100-day paper. It's pretty fascinating. In a nutshell, they're saying there are 4 sectors they are going to zoom in on. They have zoomed in on semiconductors, high capacity batteries for EVs like Teslas of the world, the rare earth elements, and pharmaceuticals. So us being in GlaxoSmithKline pharmaceuticals, we have to watch this really, really carefully. Now, what I did was, Lydia, let's go to the next one. I went to their 100-day supply chain review, and I drew out 2 word clouds. Okay, I'm a bit soft on the tech part of it. I didn't know. I was asking Leah on the word cloud. I didn't realize there's a website you can drop in everything and it gives you a word cloud. So I put the paper in where they said, what is their concern? And these are things that popped up, right? Resilience of the supply chain's risk. China's featuring really high, right? As much as we get these awesome, inexpensive, high quality products from China, we are becoming more and more reliant. The biggest example I'll give you is Apple. Anyone bought iPhone 13 Pro Max? A lot of people are buying. There you go. It comes directly from China. You put in an order, it comes from Foxconn. That's how it ships. It's not here in some warehouse. If you buy one of GlaxoSmithKline's medicines, it'll come from some warehouse in Knoxville, Tennessee, or Richmond, Virginia. It's been sitting there for 2 months. But Apple's supply chain is so fast. Their suppliers are so effective. Foxconn is so good. It directly comes there. But it's just one example. A lot of basic manufacturing is out of China. So you'll see a lot of theme there where now companies are thinking, what are the options? And it's just not pandemic that has complicated the equation. A lot of it was, when Trump got into the trade war discussion, which for right or wrong reasons, started this dialogue. And if pandemic goes away and China gets into this thing with Taiwan, so it's a theme, right? So we have to understand, and countries and companies have to become more reliant on the supply chains that are not China. For pharma, it threw up, things like redundancy, etc. Our life is very difficult because we are actually sourcing a lot of medicine, and our suppliers are also in China. So it's a very long supply chain, especially for our biotech manufacturing. It's like very long. It starts in Shanghai, sometimes docks in Europe. That's where we do some semi-processing. Then it comes into US. So it's a very expensive supply chain. What the government has done is it has actually prioritized what are the areas. It's exactly opposite of whatever I said. They're talking about a lot of domestic production. They're talking a lot of security, and they're talking a lot of investment within the company. I don't know who's tracking vaccines like every day. Now I don't do much of it. There was a John Hopkins, dashboard. It showed where are the cases going up and down, and now there's a Bloomberg dashboard that shows how vaccination drive is moving. You could see that US is systematically actually incentivizing vaccine and medicine production within the country. So I keep calling Trump. When he got the antibody cocktail, when he got virus, Regeneron was, the manufacturer, and Regeneron is one of the more popular drugs. If you don't have vaccine, or if you have vaccine and you get COVID, you get on their biologic antibody cocktail, and it can actually more than 60-70% times actually cure you. Very, very good, but very expensive drug. So US government is going around and investing in such systematically in such companies that can actually help the production. Even for vaccines, it has incentivized Moderna, Pfizer, Novavax, like a lot of companies, AstraZeneca. I think GlaxoSmithKline also got some funding from them. So you will see a lot of this theme where, infrastructure investment will come into private companies to support these areas. I don't know much about semiconductor. Microchip is the hottest commodity at the moment, and they think this is going to last into 2023. It's not going to get solved, so easy. Let's go to the next one, Lydia. What I've done here is I've called up, taken out a specific slide by A.T. Kearney that talks about the state of the union of, supply chain in pharmaceuticals and its heavy reliance on China, right? We've seen in last 10 years, API is the basic drug manufacturing, that's the key salt that goes into drugs. Sourcing has doubled, from China. Almost 70% of our supply is based there. And you can see any basic drug that you buy over-the-counter drug from Walgreens or CVS, there's a 70 to 90% chance that chemical manufacturing is there, which is not bad. I think this has reduced the cost of medicines, increased availability, but the reliance that it has caused outside of the country or countries, that's a balance that needs to be taken care of. I don't think it's going to come back. If it is 90, it's probably gonna, even if we put all our effort, massive investment, come down to 70 or something like that. But question is, are we actually going to go on, on the other side, or, pull a bit back? So this is an interesting one that people like myself, my colleagues, and, other people within pharma industry that we are thinking at this point of time. If we are going to build a factory, where are we going to build the next factory? Or we are not going to build a factory or source, where is that supplier going to be? So it's a big decision question. So why am I saying this? Lydia, if you go on to the next slide. This is something that I've pulled out of Gartner again. They do this annual survey, and they say that almost 33% of the supply chain leaders are actively working, moving the business out of China in key markets. Again, there are sources they are looking at. It's interesting, we say Vietnam, India, Mexico. Trust me, when we had massive pandemic in India, situation was not that good either. So I don't think alternatives are good answers. And I don't think moving away from China per se should be the key motive. Question is how we can make a more resilient and actually globally diverse supply chain that can bring you, stability at this time, and just not rely on one or two countries. Okay. Yeah, let's go to the next one, Lydia. And last but not the least, this is something new we are doing. Okay. This is probably the first thing on the graph. It is how do we do anticipation? Let's look at the next one. But don't read too much. I'm sorry. I was trying to put too much text here. This is a map of Dell's, supplier ecosystem, and small dots and big dots are suppliers that Dell are suppliers that source other suppliers. I don't know if you guys learn supplier tier mapping. If you go on to the next slide, it's a typical kind of, we say this is a wall after which no one sees what it is. What happens to us, our procurement people, when they place orders, they set up supply chains, they negotiate, they get the best supplier, they get ones, who give them the best rates, highest quality, but they source some components from somebody else, okay? And then these guys source from somebody else. But if you see what's happening after 2 or 3 tiers, they probably all go to one guy, this little guy in Fukushima, Japan, that's making this one vital component that's going to everyone else. And if there is a earthquake or something, boom, everything, blows up. So one of the most active things happening right now is supplier mapping. Let's see the next one, Lydia. This is a snapshot from a system that we are using. It's called Resolink. It's not the only one, there are many. So this is how one of our supply chains is mapped. And these are some active events happening in the world right now. So what the system does is it scans the world. You map all your suppliers there, and it continuously gives you feedback. What are the regional issues going on? And you constantly keep a track of your suppliers. This way, you're ahead of the game. I've blacked out a few key suppliers, but right now there's a massive coal shortage going on in India. It is driving a massive power shortage in India because a lot of power is still thermal coal-based, and how it is impacting suppliers. So you can open a war room, you can collaborate with your suppliers and track which ones, going to go down for a week, etc. I've done another view on the next slide. This is what is, we've taken a specific one where for a bill of material, it actually shows you if it goes down, what can be the revenue impact. And you can actually start calculating how you're going to prioritize this, which area you should look at best. This is talking about, the recent weather outages we had at East Coast because of the storm. I think this area was impacted heavily as well. You had floods, etc. But which suppliers have bounced back from it, who is still delayed, and how soon they can get back, etc. You collaborate, and you can calculate how this is going to impact your supply chain. So another way of doing it. Let's go to the next one. This is where I was kind of talking about. I had never studied strategic stock in college or in my early years, and this is something you will hear more and more. A lot of people call this as a strategic buffer to actually manage their supply chain on an ongoing and a regular basis. Safety stock does, it manages business as usual, but based on where your suppliers are, how expensive the commodity is, and how you think you're going to bounce back, strategic stock is something that all key manufacturing companies are putting at right places in their supply chain at the moment. So another thing that can actually help you bounce back. I can give you an example for some medicines, some life-saving medicines that we moved from Europe into US. A typical safety stock is 1 month, 2 month coverage, takes care of the bullwhip effect. But if you have an outage, there's a weather incident, or there is a lockdown, this tends to, we tend to keep around 3 to 4 months of strategic stock at various nodes to make sure we don't do that. And it's not something set in stone because the formula is, it's very qualitative measure, and you can keep changing it depending on how the global landscape stabilizes. Okay, so I think might be my last one. Let's see what's the next one. Yeah, so I would like to kind of get Rachel to take us a bit, through her journey. But where I want to end is right. There are many more things companies are doing, and I pulled this from the Bloomberg tracker that I was talking about. As much as there is doom and gloom, US has, especially led by 2 companies, Pfizer and Moderna, have shown what supply chain can do. I don't know how many of you are tracking Moderna. I didn't know much about the company 2 years ago. They have no factory. They're based out of Boston. They use contract manufacturers. They had no product coming, till this vaccine came. They had a vision of mRNA. But the beauty in all this is, yeah, obviously there's innovation, in 6 months, how they ran a supply chain and launched this awesome successful vaccine. BioNTech followed a different model. They worked with Pfizer, and Pfizer, in Kalamazoo, Michigan, they have a massive factory and they had scale. Obviously, you can see Pfizer was always a few weeks ahead of Moderna, but Moderna is an awesome story. So what I want to end with is innovation and managing risk are the key things. Obviously, we can put in tools like AI, digital. I showed you example of Resolink that we're using. Rachel's going to talk a bit about LlamaSoft. This is another scenario planning tool we're using. But if you want to join supply chain, this is the best time. For those who are graduating soon, it's even better. I won't say these things will go on forever, but this is actually, these systemic gaps have shown how important this role is and what can be done on a strategic level just now, just not on a day-to-day level. So there's a lot of hope, and we'll talk a bit about what we do in GSK, and we'll actually also, Lydia will show you how you can apply to various roles, etc. But please note your questions. Leanne, maybe we'll go through the round and do questions, or do you want me to stop and
Maybe because we will switch, then maybe let's first have question. And
let's do that. Let's do that. I don't know how we go in the room, do online.
Yeah.
You can just unmute and ask. So if there are any questions and anyone has, please feel free to ask. Please go for it.
So for online attendees, you can also raise your hand, and then we will see if you have any questions. Yeah, we have quite a few people online, and in-class students also, if you have questions, feel free to.
So I have one specifically for strategic shock or strategic shock. I know it's a qualitative measure.
Yeah.
So is that based off of SWOT analysis? Or is that
Yes. So there are many ways to do it, right? We have developed our own SWOT analysis formula. It's like a triple axis formula, not exactly like SWOT. We'll look at the revenue coverage in market, criticality of, because we make medicines, how critical these medicines are. So if it's a life-saving medicine, like something that treats cancer, and what is the location of the supply chain node that manufactures, and we triage that, and then we come up with, what should be the strategic stock. So if it's a medically critical item, and so if it was paracetamol, we know if you don't get GSK's paracetamol, you'll get Johnson & Johnson's, right? So that will not get that much weightage. But if you're a critical drug, high weightage, if it is going to cause a massive impact to companies' sales and bottom line, that's another measure. Another is, where is this, the product coming from? If it's manufactured in Korea, or it's manufactured in Shanghai, or it's manufactured in Italy. So if it's too far away from the consumption area, let us say US, East Coast is where you stock, you'll tend to have, for a cancer medicine, manufactured out of Shanghai, coming here, you tend to have a big strategic stock. So those are the three factors we typically use.
Okay. And just one more question. So is it also based off Porter's 5 values? Would that be so Porter's 5 values?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It is. Everyone has, their own. What we have started doing is we do an annual review based on these 3 parameters, and then we triage, right? And a lot of this is something that we do and revise on an annual basis. Some things may come on the list, some things may go off the list. It's not something that's going to stay, forever. Thanks.
Any other questions? And also online attendee, you can feel free to ask questions.
Hi, my name is Niyati. So my question relates to supply chain, that now after the pandemic, we've seen the global supply chain being very strained. So what is the future? Do we focus on making the global supply chain resilient, or do we focus on making our sourcing locally, so that if this situation was to happen again, then we are more well prepared and we are more equipped?
It would be perfect if we could do locally, but I think a lot of manufacturing has moved out of US, for right or wrong reasons, and a lot of Western countries, and like China has become a superpower, because all the right things did a few years ago. So like what we are doing and, trends that are brought around are, as I said, a lot of supply chain professionals are looking at a more diversified model globally where you can actually do that. So you may not get the cost advantage, but you'll get a more resilient supply chain. So I'll tell you, and Rachel will share some notes. Recently, we have done some strategic investments in other countries like Korea. Korea is substantially more expensive, but they actually do the balancing act for us. We have done some substantial investments within US and Philadelphia area. So it's a bit of a triage of, still keeping to use China as a strategic cost lever, and, they do a lot of scale well. They can quickly invest and build and go up. A lot of countries can still not do it. Balancing it with other global alternatives. But we are back to heavily investing in Europe and in America as well, which is expensive, but once in a lifetime, even if it's like one pandemic, it pays it off, right? So
Thank you.
Actually, I have a just one thought I would like to
it's
share.
not difficult. So.
Yeah.
A thought, okay.
Maybe
Yeah,
I need to go back.
please.
So I have one thought to share inspired by Ash's talk, and also I have one more question. So my thought is just now you actually emphasized a couple of very important things. Number one, sometimes we will be concerned if the supplier is far away from us.
Yeah.
And also we try to consider sometimes the strategic stock and the safety stock. So now if we think of this, if we try to reduce the lead time, say one option is we move the supplier closer.
Yeah.
The second option is we pay more money and we make the transportation faster.
Yeah.
Now, if we reduce the lead time, naturally, the supply chain will be more reliable, because if we have any trouble, then we can quickly respond. The second is normally people will feel we have to pay more in order to move the supplier closer, or we pay more to make the transportation faster. However, the advantage for us to do so is we can reduce uncertainty if lead time is shorter. Then in the safety stock calculation, for example, lead time will affect safety stock. If we have a very short lead time, then your safety stock can be saved. So it's a kind of saving, and we do have this kind of trade-off. Moving somebody closer or pay more on transportation can incur higher cost, but the advantage is good. The supply chain is more reliable, and also our stock spending is lower. And also my feeling is in supply chain, we have some trade-off and something we need to consider. One is the inventory buffer, inventory spending. The second is production cost. And the third is the transportation or lead time cost. I will say 3 buffers. One is inventory buffer, the other one is the production buffer, and then capacity buffer. And then the third one is the time buffer. So if we have a very powerful control on time, then the other 2 buffers can be shorter, can be lower, and we can spend a bit less. So I will say to just think of this topic, resilient. Actually, it is related to time buffer. If we can do quick response, we can make supply chain more reliable. So this is my thought based on this great talk. And I just have one quick question. So just now you compare the resilience and non-resilience performance. And initially the green curve, the green plot and the red plot, they were very close. Here. So maybe, so here, my feeling is sometimes, as you also mentioned, in order to make a supply chain very reliable or resilient company. So in this case, I will say if there's any disruption, nothing happened, I will say the green plot will be slightly lower than the red plot.
Probably. Because you're investing, right? So, So the thing, like, the way this calls out is, right, when nothing's happening, everyone's happy. You are investing in AI, you're like, somebody's investing in Resolink, prediction models and all that. Everyone's happy. And then there's an ignorant company, they're like, yeah, let's go cheap, let's go fast. But once you get the shock, everything goes down.
Yeah.
You get into a lockdown, who comes faster? So like, when we are staying at home, we can do that, but companies have to send workers back into factories to start manufacturing. That never stopped, right? So I can give you a few examples. I can give you 2 quick examples, right? Like global microchip shortage is impacting, auto industry. For pharma, we had an equivalent version of shock. It was for single-use systems that was driven by high demand for vaccine production. So a typical high volume intake of medicines is tablets. Most of the times when you have any issue, headache, something to do with stomach, inflammation, you take a medicine, right? Antacid, you take a medicine. But vaccine doesn't come in tablet. Vaccine is sterile fill in a vial that goes into an injection. So what this whole, crisis did, when everyone started going after vaccines, companies started going after input materials. People started buying syringes, vials, anything that, single-use systems that go in there. Like going joke was, companies were buying sand in California that is used to make glass, to make vials, because they're just few companies. It's like somewhere in Death Valley, there is this sand that, is pure. So it kind of, the whole thing just goes so fast. So the thing here is, you don't have to think all the time about pandemic, but having a working unit, whether it is through AI or, issue management, how you can take the impact and bounce back stronger. I think that's pretty much what, this is showing. It is like when stuff happens, right? That's when companies, your big boss comes and say, hey, you need money, but by that time it's too late, right? So you should have to systematically invest in that. Hope that makes sense.